When we think of the invention of the gun, we usually imagine a cowboy's revolver or a medieval knight being knocked off his horse by a puff of smoke. But the origin of the firearm doesn't start with metal or bullets. It starts with a search for eternal life. In the 9th century, Chinese alchemists were busy mixing different minerals together, trying to find an elixir of immortality. Instead, they accidentally created the most lethal substance in human history, gunpowder. They noticed that a specific mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal didn't make you live forever. It exploded. At first, they used this fire drug for fireworks and signal flares. But it didn't take long for the military to realize that if you could control that explosion, you could change the face of war. The very first gun wasn't even made of metal. It was a fire lance. Imagine a long bamboo tube filled with gunpowder and shrapnel, like broken glass or small stones, attached to the end of a spear. You'd light a fuse, and for a few seconds, it would act as a handheld flamethrower and shotgun combined. It was terrifying, unpredictable, and often just as dangerous for the person holding it as it was for the enemy. By the 13th century, the Chinese had upgraded from bamboo to cast iron and bronze, creating the hand cannon. These were basically miniature versions of the large cannons used to knock down city walls. They were heavy, incredibly slow to load, and you couldn't really aim them. To fire one, you had to hold it with one hand while sticking a red-hot wire or a burning coal into a touch hole. It was clumsy, but it meant that a peasant with a week of training could suddenly take down a knight who had spent his entire life practicing with a sword. As these thunder canes traveled along the Silk Road into the Middle East and Europe, the race to make them more practical began. The big problem was the ignition. You can't exactly carry a bucket of glowing coals into a rainy battlefield. In the 1400s, we got the matchlock. This was the first time someone thought to add a trigger. Pulling the lever dropped a glowing, slow-burning cord, the match, into a pan of powder. For the first time, a soldier could keep both hands on the weapon and actually try to aim. But the matchlock had a huge flaw. The glowing cord. It was useless in the rain. And at night, it was like holding a giant, "shoot me" sign for the enemy. The solution came in the early 1500s with the wheelick. It worked like a modern cigarette lighter, using a spring-loaded steel wheel to strike a piece of pyrite and create sparks. It was a mechanical masterpiece. But it was so expensive and complex that only the incredibly wealthy could afford them. The real breakthrough that brought guns to the masses was the flintlock in the early 1600s. It was simple, reliable, and cheap. You just had a piece of flint hitting a steel plate. This technology was so effective that it remained the standard for over 200 years. It was the weapon of the American Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, and the early days of the Wild West. However, even with the flintlock, you were still loading from the front. You had to stand up, pour powder down the barrel, ram a ball down after it, and pray the wind didn't blow your priming powder away. In a heated battle, the fastest soldiers could only fire about 3 rounds a minute. Everything changed in the mid-1800s with two massive inventions: the percussion cap and the self-contained cartridge. The percussion cap replaced the open pan of powder with a tiny, weatherproof explosive cap. This led to the Mini ball, a bullet that actually expanded to fit the grooves inside a barrel. What we call rifling. This made guns vastly more accurate over long distances. Then came the breech loader, which allowed soldiers to load from the back of the gun while lying down, followed closely by the revolver. Samuel Colt didn't invent the idea of a repeating gun, but he perfected the mass production of it. Suddenly, a single person had 6 shots ready to go without reloading. By the time we reached the late 1800s, the invention of smokeless powder meant that the battlefield was no longer covered in a thick white fog after the first shot. This paved the way for the Maxim gun, the first true fully automatic machine gun, and eventually the modern firearms we see today. The history of the gun is a journey of miniaturizing power. We went from giant, stationary cannons to bamboo tubes, to mechanical flint strikers, and finally to the high-speed, precision instruments of today. It's an invention that didn't just change how we fight. It changed how we draw borders, how we hunt, and how we think about personal power. When you look at the long timeline from an accident in an alchemy lab to the modern era, it's clear that the fire drug changed the world more than any elixir of life ever could. Does the rapid evolution of this technology from a bamboo stick to a machine gun fascinate you? Or is it a bit chilling to think about? Thanks for watching.